talk about some books I have read recently, now that I am reading again semi-regularly. The writing is not going as well, as we all know. When I'm reading, I'm not writing. When I'm writing, I'm not reading. I'm in a reading cycle right now, mostly because it's the end of the school year, there's a lot going on, and sitting down to write is really difficult for me right now. So I have been reading instead. The first thing I wanted to talk about was the Tower of Nero. I finally finished it so many years later. The Tower of Nero is the final volume in Rick Riordan's The Trials of Apollo, which is a series I have actually really enjoyed. I have been reading Rick Riordan since those first Percy Jackson books came out. I read those aloud to my kids. In fact, I read all of the Percy Jackson, the Jason books. I read the Kane Chronicles, the Magnus Chase books. I read those all aloud to my kids. I read most of the Trials of Apollo aloud to my kids as well, until we finally got to the point where they were of an age and all busy enough with their own stuff that sitting down every night to read aloud was no longer really an option for us. It's a sad time in a parent's life and like family time when that time comes, but it's been a real joy to read all these books aloud to the kids. And the Kane Chronicles are some of my favorites, and I think the Trials of Apollo, and I do also really like the Magnus Chase books, but they're all great. And so finally I finished the Tower of Nero, which brings the Trials of Apollo to a satisfying conclusion. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I think I just docked slightly because it's not one of my all-time favorite books or anything, and also, though the conclusion was satisfying, it didn't do anything particularly new or unexpected. I just didn't find anything in it that was that wowed me above and beyond what I expected from the book. But still a solid read, a solid series, and I really enjoyed it. So that was the Tower of Nero. And yes, Crowley is here. The next book I read, I just picked this up at the library on a whim. It was The Meaning of Flowers. I don't even remember who wrote it. I'll have a thumbnail of the book up on the screen. This is it was from the 1970s, and I just love floral language, especially the Victorian art of conveying meaning with flowers. I used it in my Game of Hearts Sherlock series of fics, and it's just one of my favorite little things. So I just picked this up on a whim. I literally just sat down and skimmed through it as in an evening, because it's not a long book. It's not nearly comprehensive for all the various types of flowers. I'm sorry if you can hear the washing machine chiming, but anyway, Crowley, don't help. Anyway, it was fine for what it was, a 1970s book about flowers. Like I said, it wasn't very comprehensive. There was an index in the back that listed more flowers than were listed in the actual book, which had entries with descriptions of the flowers, their mythological origins or whatever. Crowley, honest to God, would you stop? Get down. Anyway, I gave it a 3.0. It was fine. It was what it was. And it was nothing special or exciting. It was, like I said, just something I picked up at the library on a whim while I was browsing. And it's fine. I've seen better, more, like I said, comprehensive books on the subject, more interesting books. But this one's older. It was, it was fine. So the third book I read, it's only 55 pages long. So my bingo board, and I will post that, if not here, then towards the end of the video, so you can see where I am with my bingo. One of the prompts is to read an author with the same initials as you, and I have a couple of options there, depending on if I use my actual initials, the initials I write under, these kinds of things. But I picked up Brokeback Mountain by Annie Proulx. I have never read anything by Annie Proulx. I have never seen the movie Brokeback Mountain, but I was always kind of vaguely interested in it. It seems like something that would be my kind of thing, maybe. So I picked it up and read it and did not like it at all. I did not care for the characters. I did not care for the writing style. It just wasn't for me. I don't know. So if you don't know, if you're unfamiliar, this is a story from the 1997, I want to say, and then it became a movie a few years after that. It's about these two cowboys in, I want to say, the 60s or 70s. They are, 19, 20 years old. They are up on Brokeback Mountain for a summer tending sheep. And they have a romantic relationship, which is fine. Like, that, to me, that setup, I'm like, I'm in. But then just the way it was written, it's written from one of the points of view of Innes. And there's like this stupid frame story where, like, it starts with Innes waking up. He's older now. He wakes up. There's a windstorm outside. And he's like, oh, but he had a good dream because he dreamed about Jack. And Jack is, his lover, was his lover. And I don't know, that just feels really cliche. Maybe in 97 it wasn't, but it definitely feels cliche now. And then the whole rest of it's like this long flashback to remembering his time with Jack and how after that summer they went their separate ways, but Jack would come visit, and that ended up busting up Innes's marriage. And, Jack wanted basically for them to, go start a ranch together, have a life together, And Innes was like, I can't do that. And then, spoilers if you haven't read it, and I assume this happens in the movie too. I have no idea. People tell me the movie's very different and much better, so maybe. But Jack ends up dying anyway. So they never end up having like that life together that Jack really wanted. And I think it's not even, I can't even tell. It's written from Innes's point of view. I can't tell if he wanted it and just didn't feel like he could have it. Like, the characterization in this is not great. It's just, I don't know. I didn't feel like the characters were well developed or delineated very well. And that just might be because of the style or because it's only 55 pages long. I don't know. But anyway, it wasn't for me. I gave it a 2.5. I feel like looking at it now and the more I think about it, it's more like a two star for me. So I might change that. I think on Goodreads I only gave it 2 anyway. I didn't round up. But yeah, it just, I don't know. For something that I thought for sure was my thing, the way it was written and presented, it definitely was not my thing. Tell me if you think I should see the movie though. Finally, the book you might actually be watching this video for, this may be where you skip to, I don't know. The Sun and the Star by Rick Riordan and Mark Oshiro? I don't know. This is a dual written story about Nico D'Angelo and Will Solace from Rick Riordan's like world of Percy Jackson and whatnot. So I have a lot to say, and there will be spoilers, so if you haven't read the book and want to go in cold, stop now, because I'm going to talk about plot points. I'm going to talk about things that you may not want to know before you read. Okay, so Nico D'Angelo is one of my favorite characters. You know me, I love my broody types. If you've read Ghosts of Marshall Park, you know that Julian, he's my guy. Emery in Switchgrass Crown, he's my broody type too. So definitely, like, he's one of my favorite characters, and I was so excited that there was going to be a book about him and Will, this book disappointed me. At the same time, I was guarded because I knew dual written books, like co-written books, historically are not great. I mean, they can be done really well, but they can be also very uneven. And this one felt like it wasn't quite up to the standards I'm used to from like a Rick Riordan book. So, I'm not going to ding like the other author or anything. I'm just going to say I think the process of co-writing, I am an author and I have co-written, and that is hard to do and keep something consistent, especially if you're co-writing something to fit into a universe that has been written, by one person for a long time. Anyway, here's the story. This is the setup. Nick and Will are staying at Camp Half-Blood as the campers leave for the fall. They're all going, home to wherever, back to school. Nico and Will don't really have anywhere to go, I guess. It's not really clear. At some point in the book, they mentioned that Nico is 15, and I was like, he's still only 15? I know he was younger than Percy back when, but I'm like, somewhere there's got to exist like a timeline. And maybe it makes sense that Nico's only 15, but I don't know. I thought he was at least 16 by now, 16 or 17. So, as somebody with teenagers in the house, anyway. Nico's been hearing this voice calling from help from the underworld. This is something that's been established, I think, in the Trials of Apollo, kind of touched on and then, pivoted away from. But finally, he's kind of got this quest and this prophecy. He needs to go back to Tartarus to save Bob. Now, if you remember, Bob is a Titan who, in one of these series, ended up in the River Lethe and forgetting who he was. So they just renamed him Bob, and he came back not as this mean, nasty Titan, but as this really nice guy with a pet cat who's called Small Bob, and Okay, so already I was kind of like, this feels like a really weak reason to have to go back to the underworld, especially to Tartarus. I don't know, the setup for me, I wasn't fully invested. And then he and Will go, and obviously there's some conflict. The idea of the son of a sun god going into the underworld, it's obviously going to affect him very negatively, and we do spend a lot of time dealing with Will not being well, really struggling. And we spend time with Nico and Will discussing not even discussing, but their relationship. It's under pressure from the quest and from, because the underworld can affect emotions negatively and, things like that. But Nico's kind of, you don't accept me as somebody who has this amount of trauma and darkness and whatever. You keep trying to heal me instead of accepting me as I am. And Will's kind of coming to terms with the idea that maybe he just doesn't know enough about the underworld. So there's there's a lot of subtext here about maybe you just don't know enough about somebody's history or the place that they're from, or to comment on your attempt to fix something may actually be making it worse. I don't know. I feel like there's anyway. I don't want to get political, but I feel like there's some political stuff embedded in that. And then they find out that the big bad that is holding Bob in the underworld is Nyx, who is the goddess of night. She's a progenitor, she's, an elemental, fundamental goddess, right? And her big beef is that she doesn't want Bob to change. She doesn't want Bob to be Bob because she wants Bob to be the Titan that he is meant to be, right? So now this is pretty overtly a story about conservative politics, and you need to be who you were born to be. The person you were born is the person you need to stay as, right? So, that's pretty much the entire angle here is them fighting a Karen of sorts who's mad that Bob wants to be Bob and not be this Titan anymore. And he wants to go live his own life, and he has the right to change and be who he feels right to him to be, which is all stuff I agree with. I have 3 queer kids. Believe me, I believe, but like, and I mean, it's not nearly as ham-fisted as I've seen in some books, so, but it's still very much like there. You know, it's just, it's still pretty, it's not even subtext, because they literally have discussions about, well, you should be allowed to change if you want. People change throughout their lives at different points in their lives. You can be whoever you want, feel however you want. You don't have to be one thing your whole life. And, you know, and that's all true. But, you know, again, it's a little on the nose when you're having like that actual literal discussion. My plot aside, so, and, you know, message aside, I agree with the message. The plot to me, again, a little weak. Didn't really... Going to save Bob from Nyx just, for me, was not a compelling quest. Will just constantly being sick felt like... I was just like, okay, yeah, we get it. He's not doing well. Next. I loved that small Bob, the cat, is there, though, to guide them as like a third member on their quest, so that was fun. The troglodytes are back. One of them really kind of looks up to Will and wants to be like Will, and I liked that. I liked a lot of the minor characters that we saw. I really enjoyed the description of Persephone's garden at one point, when Will and Nico sneak in to it, and Will has a very interesting interaction with Persephone. I kind of wanted, and I know this would not be a popular thing, because obviously we always want our happy endings in these books. I kind of wanted there to be some kind of Persephone-esque, like, because the prophecy says something about having to leave something of equal value behind. And I can't even remember what that thing that they left behind ended up being, because I don't know, like, I'm not sure what that trade-off was, but I kind of wanted that to be like Will and Nico having to spend half the year in the underworld and half the year above ground, like a trade-off. But, you know, obviously that's kind of a stretch. It's kind of far-fetched, and it wouldn't really play into the typical happy ending of one of these books. This is a standalone. It's not the start of a series. So at the end of the day, for me, what really detracted, what made me give it like a 3.5 instead of, because I mean, I did enjoy it more than not, but, and I don't know, 3.5, somewhere in there, was that the characterization did not feel true to the characters as they were established in previous books. Like, Dionysus is far too, like, manic or enthusiastic, happy, helpful. Like, he's not as grumpy as I expect. And I get that, like, Dionysus, he's got a wine, he's gonna have these, like, manic moments, like, mania is his thing. But, like, as established in many, many books, this did not feel like the Mr. D that we know. He was way too invested, way too interested in Nico. I don't know. That didn't work for me. And then Nico, again, like, his attempts to be lighthearted and make jokes felt very weird and off-putting. And because they don't, in the story, they don't talk about him, like, trying to be different, trying to be, like, you don't get a sense that this is just how he is now. And it's like, it did not feel like the Nico that I had grown to love in previous books. Like, this felt like a very weird version of Nico. And I get it. Like, the whole message is people can change, but this did not feel like a natural progression for this character as written. I mean, I could get that he might try to make a few more jokes now that he's got this really cool boyfriend who's, you know, the son of Apollo or whatever, and he's trying to come out of his shell more and stuff like that. And I can totally see that, but I needed a little more self-reflection on Nico's part to buy that he's trying, and maybe not, it's not always working when he's trying to be lighthearted or whatever. But like at one point he like gives Will a playful slug on the arm. I'm like, the fuck? Anyway, I was like, no, no. But you know, it was fine, I guess. Like I said, I enjoyed it more than not. Overall, I was a little bit underwhelmed by the whole of it. I feel like there was more I was going to say, but that I think covers largely the scope of like the story. And yeah, I mean, it just vaguely, to be honest, I had, like I said, hedged my expectations knowing it was like co-authors for the book. And so I wasn't as disappointed as I might have been if I had gone in expecting something at the level of a regular, you know, Percy Jackson type novel. But since I had already kind of assumed it wasn't going to be quite up to that standard, I wasn't as disappointed as I would have been otherwise. So yeah, I don't know. I've heard from people that there's a lot of fan fiction that's better, that like nails the characters better than this did, and that might be true. Nico, you know, battling his demons, and then like his literal demons become little out. They call them Cocoa Puffs, and I was just like, okay. I mean, I don't know. That part was kind of cute, though. I mean, but and then there's like this nymph named Gorgira. I want to say Gorgira because of Godzilla. I don't know. I don't know how they were pronouncing it. I didn't look it up. And like it kind of depends on if you're anglicizing or using actual like. Anyway, but I just kept thinking Godzilla. And she wasn't Godzilla. She's a nymph who's stuck in the underworld because she's married to a river. Anyway, overall, like I said, 3.5, somewhere in there. It was fine. It had some issues for me. Like that's all personal preference. That's all me filtering it through like the things I wanted to see or would have expected to see, and it not quite reaching that standard. And like I said, I agree with the message. In some places it's a little bit just like right on the nose, and I just wasn't convinced by the overall quest, just the overall plot. I don't know, I just didn't find that compelling as a plot. But that's it for me. I am now reading We Fly on Sticks or something like that. I don't know. We Ride on Sticks. Is that it? The one about the field hockey girls in Danvers. I lived in Massachusetts for 12 years. Very familiar with Danvers and Salem. And so it sounded like a fun book, and so I picked that one up, and so I've only just started it, and that is my current read. And yeah, until my next video will probably be about everything I've been watching lately, and then we'll get back to books somewhere down the line. In the meantime, if you've read The Sun and the Star, or, you know, if you're a fan of any of the Rick Riordan books or the like, let me know, and let me know your thoughts. And I will see you next time. Take care.